welcome back to another bold, brainy episodes of AIBiz, where we decode the intersection of mindset, innovation, and the real world hustle. I'm your host Avik, and today we are diving into a topic that's redefining the way we build the impact of AI on the world of software startups. Yeah. Now, today's guest didn't just take the scenic route into the tech, but he took, yeah, he took the scorched earth and burned it down and rebuilt to route, and it worked. Yeah. So please meet Paul Byrne. So welcome to the show, Paul.
Hey, thanks very much. It's great to be here.
Amazing. So, Paul, before we start, I'll quickly have to introduce you to all the listeners. Dear listeners, Paul is the founder of Razoyo and Refactored Group, the two companies that making waves in the e-commerce and SaaS. So, I mean, if you're not aware of SaaS, it is software as a service. So he raised quit his job, then learned to code from scratch, bootstrapped his vision, and built now one but two impactful tech businesses. Yes. And today, he's here to unpack the truth about AI, what it really means for the startups, and how it's changing the entrepreneurial landscape is, like how founders can actually use it to grow smarter and faster. So, whether you are a founder, a coder, or someone who is dreaming about turning chaos into code, then this episode is going to light a fire under you. So, wait, let's get started. Welcome to the show again.
Great. Thanks again. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Amazing. So, Paul, first off, I really loved your story. I mean, wow, I I use this word rage, but then quitting a job and launching into the unknown is not just the gutsy. I mean, it's a move a lot of listeners have fantasized about. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people I talked to have fantasized about rage quitting, and to be honest,
Yeah.
I didn't really realize that's what I had done
Uh,
until a couple of years later, and I said, "Oh boy, that really described it." But yeah, I mean, the moment was I was on the conference call
okay.
that that kind of made me a little upset
Mm.
for a variety of reasons, but I felt like I wasn't being treated fairly, and that this was becoming a more and more frustrating situation for me. So yeah,
Hmm.
I left the conference call and emailed my boss
Okay.
and said effective immediately, I'm done, and walked out the front door. I mean, that was really, yeah, that was kind of how it went down. But it's not the biggest part of the story, I guess, for me, because I I really got into technology. I had always had kind of a penchant for
Okay.
technology. I was a marketing guy. I had a degree in Italian, of all things,
Mhm.
and I also had an MBA from a university in Italy called Bocconi University. And I had worked in Europe for a while and came back to the States. And
Mm.
but I was always the guy who and I started working in the marketing department at, Pizza Hut, which was a division of PepsiCo was
Oh, yeah.
at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of immediately,
Mm.
signaled out as the guy who would, do the database queries and
Mm.
the reporting, and I was very comfortable with computers, just kinda grown up in that environment,
Mhm.
and always, curious
Mm.
about technology. And, uh, and so, it just became part of my deal. I, I took over actually just before I left Pizza Hut. I had
Okay.
taken over responsibility for what we called then database marketing,
Okay.
which drove some sort of customized uh,
Mm.
like offers printed on coupons.
Mm.
When you purchased a pizza, They'd put your
Yeah.
receipt on the top of the pizza box, and there would be a coupon based on your purchase history there. And then we also had an outbound telemarketing group that was calling
Mm,
folks who hadn't who hadn't purchased in a while.
mm,
And it was all very data heavy, and this was really before we did any internet marketing,
mm.
or before anybody really did any internet marketing at the time.
Okay.
And so I'd always kind of been in swimming in those waters, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and slowly got involved in some e-commerce projects at the
Mm,
company that I rage quit. And led to a bit of a digital transformation of sorts for some of their activities,
mm,
it was I kind of consulted on with a company that was developing a SaaS for our sales offices. And so just kind of over time was kind of moving and inching towards that direction. And I I l- ended up in a company that was already doing
mm.
some email marketing. I worked with the founder. He invited me in to become his partner as soon as I quit. I think he'd just kind of been waiting for me to
Okay.
to free up. And
Uh,
yeah, and eventually I took the
mm,
company a whole different direction, and we started developing e-commerce sites. So, I did, learn to code, taught
mm.
myself to code. My staff would probably refer to me as kind of an amateur, software developer, uh,
Okay.
because I have some really, really fantastic software engineers,
Mm,
working with me now. And, and they write all the software for our clients and for our SaaS companies. So, uh, but I think you're most interested in sort of how AI is transforming things. Is that right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm seeing. I've been speaking about this for a couple of years. 2 years ago, there was a lot of noise about how AI was going to take over software engineering jobs and write all the software and so forth. And when yeah, I became very concerned, as someone who charges people to write software for them,
Yeah.
that this might be a game changer. But I soon,
Mm,
over the course of the last couple of years, have become more aware of really,
mm,
how it all works, and my prediction is more that we're going to see an explosion of software, as we already are, and that there will be tools that enable, and there are tools, and I've
mm,
tried several of them that enable software developers to write code more quickly. Uh, and there are some that allow um, non-technical folks to maybe prototype software.
mhm.
My favorite among those right now is Data Button. Uh,
Okay.
but I've used some other ones. The LLMs are not very good at writing software. So if that's your approach, I would encourage you to look,
Mm,
for a different tool.
mm,
But I've tried Replit, I've tried Lovable.
mm,
I thought they were both horrible at writing even simple
mhm,
software. Although, if
mm,
your goal is to create like a static website,
mm,
static HTML pages,
mm,
they're adequate for that.
mm,
But Data Button's the first one that I've seen, and the thing that really sets it apart for me
mm,
is that it actually puts together a plan. So initially it's
mm,
interviewing you about what you want. It will take all of your designs, if you have Figma files, if any sort of, even handwritten
mm.
designs, workflows, like any data you can give it, and it will help you
Yeah.
put together a plan to write the software.
Mm,
And that's what really makes it different, is that it does it.
mhm,
And so I was really, really curious about the planning process.
mm,
And the only problem with the planning process is it does kind of expect you to have some technical knowledge, um, or at least, some product management knowledge to do that.
yeah.
And as I got into the thornier issues of the app, which will probably launch in a couple months here,
Mhm.
that I've been developing on Data Button, it,
Okay.
it even had me, like, copying and pasting code, and, and I was
Mhm.
and and it's aware of some of the APIs out there that are available. I've been using Twilio with it. I've been using SendGrid, um,
Mm,
kind of, and it's great at sort of connecting the web application to that.
mm,
Uh, but it doesn't quite like, um, it but there's a lot of stuff you're gonna have to discover on your own. And because I have experience in software development, it's not that
mhm,
difficult for me to do. I think if I did not, if I was able to close off that side of my brain and not rely on any of that experience, I think it would be a little bit difficult. So
okay.
and um and of course, if you read some of the research, you'll notice that when dealing with large, large
Mhm,
applications that may have millions of lines of code, they have a hard time of absorbing that and being able to write maintainable software in the style of your company. I think there's an enormous amount
mm,
of prompting and training that you have to do and continue to have to do, and some of that causes it to work less efficiently. So while there are companies out there that are using this effectively, for an entrepreneur, I think it's a hard way to go. I think at some point you're gonna need to connect with a developer and take
mm.
your prototype to really, a production ready application.
I totally agree on this. Totally agree. Yeah. And like, do you think that I mean that kind of raw leap is still necessary in today's AI-driven landscapes?
Um, yeah, like I think
Mm,
you've got to, um so there are several considerations, and there's a lot of internal discussion we've had kinda around this
mhm,
within Razoyo. So one of the things is, do you really need your code to be readable and maintainable?
mm,
If the AI is the one updating the code? And
mhm,
my answer is currently yes, because what we see is that it's even the AI, if the code is not very readable, it can't maintain it. And people think of, well, I just write this software product and it's done. And that's just not how it
mhm.
works, right? Like it really has to be, you have to count on touching it. We always say that no software is ever complete, it just
Mm,
launches. And that's really true in today's world, because
mm,
on even if you don't change any of the functionality of your software, you have
yeah,
security threats. You have changes in the way the web works. You have, you know front end, frameworks that people begin to expect. They like the React type front ends uh, on
mm,
on applications, and that's what they're used to working with. It's smoother. If you just think about the way the web looked, 15 years ago, it's very, very
mm,
different. And so, it's a moving target, and so you're going to continually work on updating, what you're working on. And
yeah,
if you're tying into APIs, yeah, that's a
mm,
whole other issue. As the APIs that you're using, they might be deprecated, or there might be a better one coming out. And you're going to be switching those things out. Like, there's a lot of reasons that you're going to need to continue working on it. And as that code base grows and its
mm,
complexity grows, the less effective AI is. It's still helpful for sure.
mm,
A lot of people talk about what's called code completion. It's sort of autocomplete. You're writing a function, and cursor or whatever IDE you're using will, suggest some completions, which you have to be very careful about, because a lot of times it doesn't really
mm,
understand what you're after. Um, so, there's still a lot of planning involved and a
mm,
lot of prompting involved, and you really have to understand how the web works, what the web technologies are,
yeah,
how they interact with what CSS and HTML and JavaScript, and
mm,
whatever language you're using on the back end. You really have to understand how that all works, how networking works, how DNS works, how you know
mm,
concurrency works, what bottlenecks are, like all of the software engineering things that you're
Yeah.
used to dealing with, they're still relevant. And the, the AI is not always gonna look for that for you. It's not always, you have to tell it, "Hey, I need to optimize this. Hey, can you check
Yeah.
this code for a bottleneck that you just wrote?"
Mm.
Um, and then the other, the really frustrating thing I think working with it is, for people that are not technical,
Yeah.
is that, there's a lot of, you know, breaking changes. And so you had something work and it was great, and done your prompts perfectly, and it was following your Figma design, and then you realize, oh my, like this one section, I just need to make a few changes to it. You make a few changes, ah, great,
Mm.
that's great, that works now. But it breaks something else in your code base. So, uh, you know, software engineers do that too, but AI is not as effective at troubleshooting as most software engineers are. So it's going to create some bottlenecks in your development process, and that's why I say, at some point you're really going to need somebody who knows what they're doing to help you out.
Exactly. Mhm. So definitely. I think a lot of folks imagine that startups as slick and shiny, but it starts with the grit and often a bit of chaos. So
Yeah.
love that you leaned into it. So yeah, and also if we talk about building and scaling, which is definitely a
Mhm,
major part of it. So
mhm,
what shifts when you are launching a startup in the AI first environment, like from team structure to product development, then to the
mhm.
decision making? What do you think? I mean, how what do founders need to unlearn basically?
Um, yeah, so I don't know about unlearning. You mean like things that AI has changed compared to, if you were doing a startup 10 years ago?
Hmm. You can say, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say that you need to just be really careful of the hype. Like, if you've been working in startups and developing, whether it's a SaaS product or anything that, a web application, anything that delivers its value via
Yeah.
software, you're dealing with, um a lot of the lessons that you've learned.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to keep those in mind. Don't believe the hype that, well, you don't need,
Mm.
testing because we have AI now, or,
Yeah.
AI can do all of your testing, or, you don't need to plan out your development because AI can do the planning for you.
Mm.
And it's like anything, anybody that's even used an LLM to write an email, uh, not you're probably not gonna go with the one that the AI wrote for you if you really want, something precise and impactful from that
Right.
communication, right?
Mm.
So, it's the same with software, development is, the tools that you've learned as you've
Mm.
gone along the way, they're still, applicable. I think all of them. There are very few that are no longer applicable. That being said, I think you need to be open to the idea of giving AI a chance,
Mm.
and figuring out, okay, based on what we're developing, or based on where I am in my startup, maybe I just need a
Mm.
prototype. Well, prototyping, that's great. There are lots of tools for that. And even in, planning workflows and that sort of thing. Like, there are a lot of great AI tools for the, I mean, you can Google them, and there are literally tens of thousands of AI tools available now.
Yeah.
Um, so, learning to reach for those tools and give them a chance and see if the technology is at the point where it's valuable enough to you now is definitely is definitely something that you need
Mm.
to learn to do. But don't lose the other things either.
Mm.
Um,
Exactly. Exactly true. Yep. Oh. what a great conversation. I mean, and also if I have to ask, like, how do you balance the automation with keeping a human-centered culture in your companies?
Yeah. Um, we've approached it, and I, it might be different for other businesses. I can really only share how we've approached it at Razoyo Refactored Group, as we've sort of helped our staff by giving them the freedom to embrace
Mm,
AI tools. And so one of the things that we've done recently is one of the groups that does staff work in project management. They had a
mm,
reporting issue
okay.
that they were using, had been for years using Google Sheets
Mm,
for, et cetera.
yeah.
And we all looked at it and we said, hey, this might be automatable, and how can we do that? And so we used this, we do weekly training with our project management group on a wide variety of things, but we've kind of dedicated the past
Mhm.
month to AI and AI tools and how to be more efficient. And we've
Yeah.
kind of been teaching each other. And so even the person who is like least comfortable with AI, if they see, somebody else in their group doing it or appeared, getting involved, and they start to get the mindset that, oh, there are things that you know, that I can do with these tools that I didn't think I could.
Mm,
And they become more comfortable with it. And for me, that's where the human element comes in. It's not trying to do this on a top down basis and just beat the drum and tell everybody you got to learn AI, you got to learn AI, you got to learn AI. No, it's finding practical situations, challenging folks to find
mm,
solutions, and then coming back together and learning as a group. And for me, that's how, we kind of maintain the
mm.
human side of things.
Very true. Yeah. Lovely. Lovely. Oh, and all right, like, future facing question before we wrap. So, uh, if you had to give just one bold piece of advice to an aspiring founder who is building their first AI powered startup, so then what that would be?
Wow. Uh, it so depends on where you are in your journey, but I would say the thing that you probably need to make sure you're doing constantly is reassessing your assumptions about what cannot be done with AI and what should and should not be done with AI. And it'll go both ways. Your assumptions may be that AI is going to be more useful, more powerful in some ways. Uh,
Uh-huh.
and you need to go back and revisit that sometimes when, as the hype and the fog kind of lifts, you can see, where really things are and where they're going to go for a certain
Mm,
extent. So I think you wanna have a process for revisiting your assumptions and
mhm,
and be disciplined about it, you
mhm.
know? And be honest with yourself about what those assumptions are.
Okay. Mhm. That's true. That's true. Definitely. Great. Lovely. Thank you so much, Paul, for showing up with so much raw wisdom. And uh, I mean, you have built in the trenches, like failed forward, and then now
For
you're
sure.
building the future. So not just for yourself, but for also the startup that brave enough to reimagine what's possible. So that's a very great part of it. Yeah. Yeah. And for everyone who is listening, like if you are on the edge of your next big leap, then maybe it's not just a tech skill that you need first, but maybe it's the nerve. Like it's the
Mhm.
trust in your capacity to figure it out. And AI won't build your dream. You will, and but it might just help you build it faster, better, and more boldly than you have imagined.
Yeah.
So the listeners, connect with Paul. Check out Razayo and Refactored Group, and let this conversation be your sign to start before you are ready. So
Yeah.
yeah, and Paul, like if someone wants
Agreed.
to connect, what will be the best medium?
So Razoyo.com, just hit the contact form on there. Anybody that mentions the podcast, I'll know, and that
Mhm.
message will get to me. Or feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. And if you want to connect, just again mention the podcast in your connection request, and I'll definitely accept it.
Perfect. That's awesome. So, dear listeners, I'll put all the links into the show notes for your easy reference. And until next time, this is your host Avik signing off from AIBiz. Keep learning, keep building, and keep leading with your mind on fire. So,